If your car gets written off, we'll help you stress less. Churchill Insurance will pay you up to £100 for immediate travel expenses, like a taxi home, while we take care of your claim. Oh yes. Chill. Churchill. Car must be undrivable. Comprehensive cover only. Onward travel to one UK destination. Excludes glass-only claims. Payment excludes weekends and bank holidays. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Hello and welcome to the first edition of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the PAUK network in 2021. Joining me today, as the same as last year really, it's Richard Clements and Kerry Greenaway.
Yeah, you won't get rid of us that easily.
No, it's the first show of the new year.
Happy New Year, boys.
Yeah,
yes,
Happy New Year
to you, my dear.
Happy New Year to all our listeners, yeah.
Yeah, and to all the listeners.
You know, did you see the fireworks? The London, obviously, we didn't go, but it was on the TV, and they did like a drone thing, and they did fireworks at various locations throughout on the Thames. I thought they did an amazing job. I loved it.
It was good. It was sort of more of a sort of. It was more of like a fireworks come light show, and you see, they did have things going through the air, didn't they? And you laughed at me when I was talking about that.
Honestly,
earlier.
I thought that was amazing. I thought it was amazing, and it summed up the year as well. It wasn't about woohoo, Happy New Year. It was like, look, this is what we've achieved this year. Like, thank our NHS. This is what we've done. I got really emotional. I was oh my god, and it was just so well done. And it was also done in a way that wouldn't have attracted the crowds. They didn't make a big thing of, this is what we're doing for New Year's Eve on the Thames this year. It was done on various locations across the, through the Thames. So it wouldn't have. And it wasn't advertised. That's one thing because I didn't think they were doing anything this year.
No, it was certainly a nice touch, and any sort of performance, it was like a performance of music, and it was all back to music, and anything that starts off with a David Bowie's got to be high up in my books.
And they did Captain Tom thing. I was in floods, absolute floods of tears last night. Or the other night, night, because this goes out a little bit later, don't it?
Oh dear, you're just giving it away.
Spoiler.
Cheeky little spoiler.
But we're talking about New Year's is always, you look back at the past year, don't you? And obviously this year, or last year now, was just such a horrible time for so many people. It's been very traumatic on a very muted level, but it's been very incredibly impacting on people's lives. And I think, yes, we can look back at 2020 and go, it was like the worst year ever. We're still not out of the woods. We still need to be careful. We still need to be discerning about what we do. We're still in lockdown here in the UK. We've still got a major problem going on in the UK. But it's a time, isn't it, New Year's Eve? We always go, next year I'm going to do this, this and this. You set your intentions for the new year. Whereas this year you can't really, because you can't go out.
Well, I think everyone's got a bit wise to it, and they're just sort of hang. I think sort of like the general feeling is to hang fire, and it will get better. It will. It has to. So it's just a case of sort of living in hope, I suppose.
At least we've got hope now.
Yes, we've got the light at the end of the tunnel, so let's sort of focus on that, and but stay in the moment, but sort of like allow yourself just a little bit of sort of foresight now, because I think coming up towards the end of last year, things were getting a lot of people down. Well, I know it was getting me down, but but hey ho, we're just trying to sort of like punch our way through it now.
This is like when you hit the wall, isn't it? If you hear of marathon runners, where they start off the year, you think 2020 was a marathon, and you start off and you're all sprightly and you're all fresh. And then slowly as the year goes on, it was like, oh my God. and then you hit a wall. And it's almost called apathy. It's called pandemic apathy. And they came across this actually in the 1918 flu epidemic that went on as well. And it's actually really interesting, actually, folks out there. So if you go back and have a look at the way that happened, the 1918 flu epidemic, it's very similar actually to what we've gone on now. Everyone goes, oh, they didn't do this then, but actually they did, folks. Yeah. So, but we're a lot more advanced now. We've got, and I have to say, one thing I am so grateful for is the NHS, free healthcare.
Yes.
Well, that's sort of...
and we've got a fantastic infrastructure with St John's that Paul works alongside or with very, very closely. And we've got, amazing structure. And although there's been a lot of criticism of it, I still think we should be out there clapping them every Thursday. I think we should still be doing that because they're going through it harder now than they were back in March when it first hit.
Well, yes, because the winter is traditionally a hard time for the health service, and they've had this on top as well. And I know a lot of places, they are at capacity, but I've got faith in the NHS and all the hard workers there, because they do work hard, and I've got faith in them to sort of get us through it, and hopefully they can get themselves through it better and come out the other end as well.
Mm-hmm. Paul, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, definitely. I second all that. And they've got, not only have they got the weight of the country on their shoulders, but their own home lives as well is exactly like everyone else out there, and they're all stuck to the guidelines. So if you feel it tough, just imagine what they go through.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Because you've only got your home life to worry about, where they've got their home life and getting people through the COVID.
But we're actually going to sort of do a reflection because, in a way, our show here on the PA UK radio network, we actually sort of came on air sort of at the start of this pandemic, didn't we? So like the listeners have been on this journey with us throughout this sort of pandemic, and sort of what we've sort of tried to give people a bit of a distraction, at least for 2 hours every week, and I hope they've appreciated it. We seem to be getting some good feedback, so we do appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, very much so, and I like a little look back, don't you guys? Because when you start looking back at some of the shows we've done over the past year, past year, yeah, whatever. We've covered some amazing topics with some amazing guests, some amazing, information we've put out there. And also, at this point, I want to say we have written a book. There is a book out there.
Oh, yes, don't forget the book.
No, exactly. The Paranormal Concept Extra, which is, we write blogs all year round. They go up on the website. But literally, on the 1st of January, we delete them all off the internet, compile them into a book, because it's, for us, we find it's easier to refer to, and it doesn't get lost in the ether of the internet. And I like a book. I love a book, me. I much prefer a book than trying to find something on the internet.
Yeah, when my copy arrives, I'll have about 2001 books. I mean, and isn't that a good number?
That is. 2021 will be better, though.
That's what I was just thinking. I think maybe you should have 2021.
Yeah. Oh, God. Well, hang on. I'll just go and add some more stuff to me Amazon basket.
No, Richard. Don't do that. God, your flat can cope, I don't think. You were going to offload some of the books you had.
Well, I think, that was your...
Yeah, that's my problem.
And that was your suggestion, Kerry. I don't know quite if you had an ulterior motive there, but no, they're staying here, don't worry. I will find homes for them.
I always check, actually, everybody. I always go, Richard, I'm looking at this book. Have you got it?
Yeah, I've got it somewhere.
Go and check in your library.
But not only is it available from Amazon worldwide, but you can also get it on Kindle.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah, for all the Kindle fans out there.
So yeah, for people that like the Kindle, I know there's a fair bit. I think about 25% of Amazon's sales of books are through Kindle. I was reading,
Yeah.
so yeah.
A lot of people do read books through Kindle, but we have got the book. It's the Paranormal Concept Extra book out there, so go and get that copy for yourself. Available on Amazon, very good price, amazing because we are amazing,
Exactly.
guys.
Oh.
Not too arrogant at all, was it? So I asked the lads, I said, right, all the shows we did last year, what were your favourites? You know, come up and tell me what your favourites were. So we're going to have a look back at some of the shows and revisit some of the concepts that we had a look at last year, because there was quite a lot, actually. Very hard, I found it personally quite hard to choose. But Richard's first one, we'll go with Richard's first one, was Mudlarking with Nicola White, which was a weird one. When he first suggested this, I was like, how is that paranormal?
I know. It was me sort of overindulging my sort of other passion, which is history. And for people that sort of know me, I do a bit of metal detecting and stuff. And I will admit that was me sort of being in a position to sort of get in contact with someone and invite them on a show. But there is this big move in the paranormal community, and you can't deny it, of haunted objects. And, I thought I wanted to try and bring to the listener, yes, we have haunted objects and stuff, and we see them all across the internet, don't we? On all the Facebook feeds, they'll have a doll and sitting there with a K2 next to it, which is all well and good, but, I find looking at that and stuff all a bit stale. It doesn't, where has the doll come from and stuff? I know there's a big sort of thing of we don't want to know, because we want to sort of pick it up from the doll. I'm not like that. I'd like to know a lot about the artifact before, not that I work with artifacts to sort of try and communicate with spirits or whatever, but I just like to know these artifacts, the history behind them, and where they come from, principally. And with Nicola and Mudlarking, it is these sort of artifacts are quite readily available, and you can literally just pick them up off the shore Thames line, off the Thames shoreline, and I find that really interesting. And those items, I think, are more sort of personal to people because they are discarded items. I mean, I know, Kerry, you was very fascinated about clay pipes, weren't you?
Yeah. Why are there so many clay pipes?
Right. So this is one of the reasons I got Nicola on. I thought, well, Kerry's got this question, why clay pipes everywhere? But clay pipes were basically used from the 16th century all the way through to practically the start of the 20th century. And what we find now, I mean, the discarded broken pipes, and they are the cigarette ends of their day. And the Thames is full of them. It's just...
Yeah, no, I mean, I found a few clay pipes myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and where I used to grow up, there was a little bit of it was literally alongside the Thames, a little way up from the Woolwich or Thames barrier. And there was a little bit of a beach there. We used to pick up all sorts. Cuttlefish was another popular one there. And we picked up so many clay pipes where they just get washed onto that little bit of shoreline that we used to play on when we was kids.
Yeah, I mean, and I just sort of just found that interesting that you can actually go out and do this, and this sort of does bring in another sort of talent, which I think sort of like a lot of paranormal investigators and people and interest. It gives you something more tangible to research as well. It's like with Nicola, I've sort of watched a few of her videos, and she's got quite a extensive research library of books and stuff, and she's actually managed on a couple of her sort of videos to actually trace stuff she's found literally just washed up on the shore of the Thames to individual people, which I just find quite amazing.
Yeah, I find all that interesting.
It was fascinating. I would just like to clarify, you do need a licence to go mudlarking along any river edge, which we found out again on that show.
Well, absolutely. I was a child at that point.
Yeah.
I didn't much care for licences and things like that.
No,
if I found it on the floor, it was mine.
Beach combing, though, isn't it? Really,
it is beach combing.
We didn't do any digging or anything.
No.
Just on the surface.
But the licences are quite easy to acquire. It's literally you just go online and apply, and you just print it off. It's just sort of like a shoreline, and I think a lot of parts of the Thames line as well. There are certain areas of archaeological significance where you're not allowed to go. I believe out the front of the Tower of London for obvious reasons.
Yeah, that'd be.
But sort of more out, you just have to get in contact with I think it's the Thames Authority, and they will grant you a licence to do it.
Yeah.
They will. Sorry, I'm chuckling because I know what's coming up. I think the other thing that came out was like, although Nicola has her own spirituality, her own faith and her, the way she works, we got into a conversation about liminal places as well, that area of between.
Yes.
And, how it feels as much as picking up the artifacts and stuff like that. It was that liminal place scenario. And she said she definitely feels presence when she's doing it on the shoreline, which from a spiritual perspective, I found quite fascinating as well. A lot came out of that show. And then we went into the do objects hold energy discussion off the back of that. And, we do have this thing in the paranormal field of do objects hold energy, and there are museums popping up around the country to do with that. And it was fascinating, that whole discussion. It's always a fascinating one, isn't it? It's always an interesting one because it leads you down psychometry. Can you pick energy up from objects? And then we looked at work done by William Denton and another guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But, there has been experimentation done, very interesting experimentation done. And it does kind of make you not then dismiss it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you just... Is there something to it? Isn't there? I mean, I keep getting drawn back to it because you can't ignore it out there in the paranormal field. It's everywhere at the moment, and it probably, and I can see why there is a lot of interest in it. It's practicality as well, sort of like instead of sort of like going out somewhere, I know you can go to locations. This is something you can possibly do at home. If you sort of like go out and collect a few bits and pieces and do experiments. I mean, I don't know what quite experiments you can do, but, you can sort of like work on it, and it's quite sort of handy. And plus, once you've got these objects, you've got them, if you own them, that is, and you can, sort of work on them for a prolonged period of time, which I think...
You say that, Richard, but now's the time to do those kind of experiments. And I would say that the 99% of the paranormal community have got some form of tech, probably an old item hanging around, even if it's from their nan or granddad, that they could do experimentation with. If you go back to the Brian Holloway show we did on paranormal apps, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
And we all went and downloaded one of his apps, and I tried it at home with a cannonball that I've got. And I had some really interesting things come out of that. So you can do these kind of experimentations under the circumstances that we're in. Richard, tell everybody, and the bloopers of the year is going to be a little bit of a theme, I feel. Retell everybody your little blooper regarding the Paranormal app.
The Brian Holloway app. Before the show, we all got together, we downloaded the app from the App Store of one of Brian's apps. I forget which one it was. Was it the... No, well, I forget. But
Axiom.
Axiom, that's right.
Axiom.
The Axiom app, and we all downloaded it, and we all said, right, over the next couple of days, we'll all go and field test it, So Kerry obviously sort of... And we didn't know what each of us were doing, so I thought, I know. I got my right paranormal investigator's hat on. I thought, I will go to an ancient battlefield, which is quite close. It's in Malden. I thought, bound to pick up something there. So I walked down this long footpath. It's quite a way to actually get there, and I switched the app on, and all I could hear was sort of sort of monks chanting, bells chiming, and and I thought, wow, this is good. But it kept repeating itself, and I kept talking to it, is there anyone there, and can you sort of, communicate with me? But it was just this thing kept repeating itself, and it wasn't until I came back and we was literally just about to go on air. I was discussing this, and they goes, yeah, well, you didn't actually switch it on. I switched on the actual sort of just the ambient music part of the app, which was just an add-on feature, which does absolutely nothing. You just play it in the background, a bit like these gamers do in fantasy games and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was quite funny. We were cracking up, weren't we, Paul?
It was. It's still funny now, isn't it, really?
It's still, yeah.
It's not going to let that one down.
No. There's a few things that none of us are going to live down after last year. Now, let's move on, because Paul's first choice, shall we say, of show, staying with the watery theme, was he liked the Kraken show, didn't you?
Absolutely, and I think with me, I've got a really big interest in cryptozoology and history, and it sort of comes into like the Greek and Roman. What's the word? Greek
mythology.
Mythology. That's the word I was thinking of. Yeah. Going brain dead now. It was Greek mythology, and I've got a very big interest in that as well. And just the Kraken is just one of the famous stories, isn't it? With like Medusa and the Gorgons and Pegasus, Perseus, and all that.
Well, in that show, I think the one thing that outstood for me in that show was you renamed the Kraken. Can you remember what you renamed him?
Ollie the Octopus.
Ollie the Octopus, everybody. The Kraken has been renamed.
Ollie the Octopus.
Ollie the Octopus. Yeah. And did you know it's been spotted recently?
What, Ollie?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I haven't. No, I didn't see that.
You've not seen the footage of that?
No.
Wow. Ghosts of Britain were out doing one of their forays. Yeah, and they were on the shoreline. I don't quite know where they were, to be fair. I didn't go that far into watching it. But the title was Kraken Spotted.
Oh, brilliant.
No,
good luck
to Ollie the Octopus.
To me, it looked like a whale. You know, like when whales or porpoises do the ring of bubbles for food. Yeah. That's what it looked like to me. It wasn't that.
Chances are that's probably what it was, to be fair.
Well, that's what I thought it was. Because it did look quite Scotlandy. I don't know if that's where they were. But I did laugh.
I know you've got a big interest in the Pirates of the Caribbean, so I thought we all got a bit of an interest in the Kraken.
Yeah, Richard still hasn't seen those movies. I would like to point out.
I've seen bits and pieces. Yeah, well,
that's got to be your New Year's resolution, which is.
Oh, I don't know. There's about 4 of them to get through, isn't there?
Well, you better hurry up with this 5.
Are they doing another one?
Who are pirates?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
In fact, quite a few shows actually around that time we ended up referencing Pirates of the Caribbean. When you go back to like the Gallows show, when we were talking about the differences between hangings that were under the admiral jurisdiction and land jurisdiction, there was a difference there, wasn't there? And how they used to line the Thames with gibbets, where they used to put the bodies of like Captain Cook, I think was the main one, wasn't he? He was up there for like 20 odd years or something stupid like that. Yeah. Captain Kidd, sorry.
Captain was an explorer. He wasn't a pirate. Just putting that out there.
I bet he was really. He just didn't get caught.
Hawaii, I think. Captain Cook. Yeah, but there you go.
Oh, dear. But I think one of the things that came through was how, when you look back in history, you've got to take it back to time, haven't you? Time, the size of the ships and what they were dealing with when they were out on the high seas, and something that to us is big but not extraordinarily big, as it were. So like a big squid, or so, a giant squid, or a giant cephalopod, which is, they get washed up over in Canada quite a lot now, and they've been studied as an actual thing. They are big, but they're not like big enough to swallow a ship.
No, I mean, it's, sort of, Mariners do sort of, they're quite a superstitious bunch, because I think we've done another show, was it Tales of the Ancient Mariners, and it did sort of tie in, and they are very superstitious, and you can see where these tales come from. I mean, you know, I was sort of quite blown away. I mean, you go on a ship, you can't whistle on a ship, can you?
No.
And it's all
And there was
sorts
a
of oddities.
ritual. Yeah, there's almost like a ritual of launching a ship. I mean, nowadays we envisage it of, you know, smashing a bottle of champagne on the side to launch it. But they used to do that with rum. And things like if you want to rename a ship, you have to, like, you know, give offerings to the sea and, you know, the sea gods and goddesses and sprites. They were a very superstitious lot, the sailors. But again, you've got to look at size relative, haven't you? Nowadays, our oceans are over hunted, as it were, overfished, aren't they? So what they were encountering back in Deer, bearing in mind, the world wasn't as big a place. No, that's the other way around. The world was a bigger place than it is now to us. You know, they're encountering, you know, creatures that they may never have come across before, because, you know, that's just the nature of the beast. Whereas now, yeah, we've got submarines, we've got all sorts of things.
The ancient mariners also used to get extremely drunk on rum, didn't they? Rum rushes.
They like the sort of rum.
You can actually now understand how they confused what was it? The sea cow with a mermaid.
The manatee. So.
Yeah. You could see how that came about, because they were that blind drunk.
But going back to what you were saying, Kerry, these elaborate and traditions and superstitions they had as regards their ships, and as you say, the world was a bigger place. Plus, you were on a ship, you would be on there, and you could be on there for months. You know, sort of sailing. So it was your home, you know, and you wouldn't get off it. So I suppose, you know, these all developed because it was in the sailor's best interest to make sure your house, which you're living in, is well protected.
Yeah. It was. I found the Kraken show the most fascinating, because it was going from mythology and then looking at it. And then you can follow it through and go into the scientific side of things, of how they have come across giant cephalopods, and they are a real thing. Whether or not they are as big as what maybe sailors were encountering back then is in question. But they are a real thing. These tales come from somewhere, and I enjoyed watching or researching the evolution of that mythology through to modern day exploration. I thought that was a good one, and I love the fact that Paul was just like, yeah, it's just Ollie the octopus, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I know they sort of say it's sort of like it might have been, because they've tentatively looked at it, but I still sort of err on the side that it is more myth than sort of based on an actual flesh and blood creature.
I think it's a bit of both, Rich. We came off the back of that, and I wasn't as convinced as you. In one of the books that was written, though, at the time, I can't remember the guy's. I should have looked at this, because the guy's name comes up again later on in life. He said one of the stories that was told was that the sailors thought it was an island, and disembarked on this island and were doing mass on the island. They were having a religious mass.
Yeah.
And it was only when it opened its eye they realised that it was an animal. I don't think they were that big.
Yeah. It's a bit like the tortoise in Never-Ending Story, isn't it?
Yeah.
He sees that and climbs up the hill because there's a tree on the top of it, and then it starts, the whole thing starts moving. Yeah. And he finds out that it's the actual tortoise.
Like, oh my God, it's that big.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh no.
But I think all these mythical creatures are all out there, but they're just not. They're just hiding because we can't name them properly. Like Ollie the Octopus, for example. and I'll Nigel the Nessie.
Nigel the Nessie.
Nigel. Yeah, if they called out for Nigel, they'd find him, but no. They've got the wrong name.
Ah, that's what it is.
That is exactly what it is.
So, what are you bringing to the table, Kerry? I'm intrigued. And what was one of your shows?
One of my favourites was the Holy Relics show,
right.
mainly because of how much we made Paul cringe on this one when we looked at the Holy Foreskin. Jesus' circumcision, and that that was in the second half of the show. But when we looked at holy relics that were big business back in the day, and like I think it was St. Peter that had about 20 heads scattered around various cathedrals around the European contingency. I just found that whole scenario very fascinating, and that belief system that's overlaid onto holy relics. And when we got onto the Holy Foreskin, literally we could feel Paul's skin crawling while we were discussing this. He even said, I think on air, I've got nothing to do with this conversation, literally nothing to do with this one.
Nothing to add.
There's no corner we won't delve into, and that was a bit of an eye-opener when we come across that. I had heard about it before, and I think on record someone researched it, and there should be about, I don't know, and there's about 20 of them sort of scattered around the continent, I think, or were. I don't think they actually sort of advertise the fact anymore.
Yeah, I think they only come in packs of 50 anyway, didn't they?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, I thought that the worst bit was one of the alleged foreskins was supposed to have been kept under a reverend's bed in a box.
Oh, yeah.
And it got stolen, didn't it?
Yeah.
And it got
Was
stolen.
this a Catholic priest by any chance?
Of course.
Well, you can imagine what the burglar thought when he got it home. Thought, I've got this pair of Nikes I got from underneath his bed. Opened it up and went,
Yeah. What a strange ring.
Here you go, my dear. Will you marry me?
I didn't even know that was a thing before we started researching that show. I was expecting, like the finger of or the tongue of. There was a tongue we found. There was also, when we started looking into that particular topic, we went into it in regards to belief system and the power that people put on objects, that they're holy and, that they are a tangible thing connecting you to that figure in religion that's so holy. And when we came across that particular item, I was expecting to talk more about like items of like the cross and, but some of the things we found were just like, why would you do that? Like one of the guys was a great orator, and his tongue, they took his tongue out. And that was, to me, like, it's like a whole act of sacrilege almost, just because he was a good orator, you think it's okay to take his tongue out, and then you're worshipping that. I find that bizarre, in all honesty. But when we hit the Holy Foreskin, I was like, I did not even know that was a thing. That was a shock to me.
Anything goes back in medieval Europe, and anything that will attract the crowds. There was no shame. But as you say, Kerry, I mean, we could have sort of, we didn't really sort of, when you talk about holy relics, I mean, what comes to most people's minds is probably the Shroud of Turin is probably the most famous. But by the time we got stuck in and doing the research for that didn't really feature at all, did it? Because
I've done a blog on that instead.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, yeah.
Which happens to be in a new book available on Amazon.
Well, there's a segue for you, Paul.
Yeah, that's only a segue. Now, talking about bloopers, at the beginning of that show, I don't know if you guys remember this one.
Oh yes,
I had to make an admission of being wrong for the first time in my life.
You being wrong, Kerry? Never.
I know. First time in my life. It was the most shocking experience I've ever experienced. The show we'd done before, we had talked about a monk that... oh, my God. I still can't believe I said that. It's a mummified monk, right? And I said, no, he's still alive in meditation. It's like 2,000 years old.
It's a monk encased in the
statue.
Sarcophagus type thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Tibetan monk that was encased in the statue. And I said, no, I'm sure he's still alive. Anyway, I've come off the back of the Holy Relic show, and I had to go off the show that we'd done. I had to go and research. We researched it, obviously. We looked into it because on the show, Paul was like, I don't think he's alive. And I go, no, I'm sure he is. I'm sure he's alive. And of course, off the back of that show, we went and looked at the beginning of the Holy Relics. I have to make the admission that we did look into it. He's obviously dead. He's mummified, but the process of that is mummification through starvation whilst in a meditative state. And then he becomes revered as an idol. And then to help preserve the body, they then put him in a statue. But before they did that, they take out his innards and they had put loads of like Tibetan holy scrolls inside him, sewed it back up and put him in the statue. That whole concept was absolutely fascinating to me, that somebody could put themselves in that kind of mindset. So I learned something, and I was wrong.
And she learned that day that Paul was right.
And I did learn that day that Paul was right. And they didn't let me forget that for about
Never.
Yeah, well, it's not often you get one over on the green away. She's usually pretty on form.
Well, that day I clearly wasn't. But I had to, that's the other thing. If we do go and find out information that maybe we've put out there that we were wrong on, we're not afraid to say, actually, guys, we re-looked at that. That wasn't right at all. I would say that, at least we're prepared to do that.
Well,
that's the whole thing, though, isn't it? Because when we do our research, we do sometimes research quite blinkered with our research, and then when we start going drifting off, sometimes we're like, oh yeah, it triggers off something in your mind, and it's like, didn't I hear something about that? As I said, like the monk, and it's not something that we've looked into, but it's something that we can go back into and look at a later date. So we would try and always give the correct information as much as possible.
Well, yeah, I think certainly the business we deal with in doing podcasts and presenting sort of like the paranormal, it's quite fantastical anyway, so we do come across a lot, don't we, to present and sort of like impart the information on, and and that story, I suppose you can sort of, quite fantastical, but hey, why not? but as Kerry had to admit, it wasn't true.
No, I did go back and look at it and admit that I was actually wrong on that one. Mark it in your diaries, guys. It doesn't happen often. All I'm saying. Again, not too arrogant there at all. Oh, dear.
She'll be on next week apologising for that.
Soz, guys. Got that one wrong. Now I'm going to take you out into the cosmos, because the next show that Richard picked was, again, one of our followers on the Paranormal Concept Show had actually messaged us and said that he's actually part of the ufology world. I am adverse to the ufology world. I find it one of the hardest areas to get my head around or believe, quite frankly. But we our follower, Christopher Murray, he's a fantastic gentleman, thoroughly lovely man. Anyway, we sent Richard off and said, right, go check it out, find out if he's sorry, ufology world, but see if he's a batshit crazy. He wasn't. He was incredibly well learned in this field. So we had him on for a show, because this is the other thing I would say is, although I'm adverse to the ufology world in a way that the guys aren't, Paul and Richard are quite happy to delve into this world, and I'm like, oh God, not that again.
That's true, right there.
I know, right? I try and keep an open mind to it. I try.
She's not very trying.
I try. I'm very trying, I think is the expression. But, Chris came on. And Richard, do you want to take this one? Because this was one of your favourites.
Well, yeah, and what sort of attracted me to sort of like Chris's sort of backstory. He is a retired NYPD police officer as well, and I knew he was involved in MUFON, and I was my sort of angle on that show would be to go, and how to investigate, and I was sort of trying to pull out sort of sort of the methods the ufology world use, which I do believe that they are quite more methodical in their investigation process, because the very sort of subject of ufology is sort of quite straightforward. Someone sort of sees a light in the sky that's moving oddly or something that's not recognised, and then they report it, which is quite a basic sort of report. But on sort of like speaking to Chris, I wanted to get through to the more nuts and bolts of basically how they catalogue reports, how they define them, and how they sort of know which ones to go in and sort of and look up further. Because, as you said, he's from the US, and they do have a rather large sort of percentage of reports sent in, and they obviously can't sort of go through all of them with a fine tooth comb. So he was sort of like enlightening us on sort of process, and they would use. And one of the ones I found very interesting was that when he's presented with a report of a suspected UFO, the first thing they do, because they have a written account, they will ask the person to do a written account, and one of the things they will do is run it through a plagiarizer. And he's sort of saying that and that does sort out a lot of sort of people who are sort of like trying it on, so to speak, or, and I just found that sort of little attention to detail quite fascinating. And also with Chris, he was very honest about his sort of like work in the ufology world, and he was very sort of honest to point out what was wrong with it as well, in his opinion, which I found quite refreshing, because the ufologists I've tend to deal with in the past are sort of outright believers. They are only sort of nuts and bolts craft that come from other planets, whereas Chris was more sort of looking into sort of, can these be interdimensional and stuff. And it was interesting. I enjoyed it.
I think the way I thought the correlation actually between how you should investigate the paranormal and how you investigate ufology actually was very apparent in that show. And because of his police background, it gave a deeper insight. Actually, I, like you say, check through the plagiarizer hadn't even occurred to me.
And you could do that to sort of like for teams out there investigating the paranormal when they get written reports in. I mean, that's just that's so easy when you think of it, isn't it?
It's like a basis, isn't it? Which I hadn't even thought of, but there were a lot of correlations between that world and the paranormal world of how we look at things, Paul.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It did bring to light a few other little bits and pieces that we can all incorporate into doing paranormal researching. But definitely it's worth a listen, just to go back and have maybe get some more ideas.
Yeah, and isn't that what this is about? It's about building on the knowledge that you've got and incorporating new ideas, maybe new thought patterns, keeping open-minded. And as I say, it was only really talking to Chris, and actually that's probably one of the first people I've spoken to from the ufology world that I actually had time for. Oh, that sounds awful, doesn't it?
I know, see, and I know Chris will actually be listening to this, and as we alluded to at the start of this segment, Kerry did, when I sort of brought this to the table, she goes, well, you've got to Skype him first to make sure he's not batshit crazy.
I know. I apologise to any ufologists out there for me referring to people like that. I've learned, though. I learned a lesson not to be so dismissive.
Yeah. I said, look, trust me, Kerry, he's sound as a pound. And
yeah, but I must admit, though, one of Richard's first questions to the guy was, are you batshit crazy?
Yeah, that's true. He did.
Well, I knew it all along. I thought, well, I just sort of, I best listen to her. It's sort of like it's listening to her, Christ, off I go,
I'm like
Kerry
a
says
wife.
I've got to do this.
I'm not going to listen to her.
No, and there are obviously a lot of people out there following the UFO craze, and some of them can be described as being rather eccentric about it. But there is obviously a lot of people out there
such a better way of putting it, eccentric.
That are not eccentric about it, and they are actually doing some really good research.
Oh yeah, and it can't be dismissed. I mean, I know there's always sort of, you're either a ufologist or a paranormal ghosty type sort of person, but I would like to see the two merge a bit more, because I'm not of the belief myself that these are nuts and bolts craft from other planets. I believe there's more of a connection to perhaps what's going on the ground that's what's happening directly above it as well. And I would like to see, perhaps in paranormal investigations, I think it would be a very good sort of practice to do. And if you go and investigate sort of like a house or an alleged haunted location, perhaps have someone whose job it is to spot outside and to sky watch outside whilst an investigation is going on.
I found, well, I don't actually think necessarily that, but I do think that you should look at correlations when you've got cases like in the Mothman prophecies. There was a lot of paranormal stuff going on as well, like poltergeist activity and stuff like that was happening on the ground, as whilst all this, interaction with something extraterrestrial. Eventually was going on, and there was when you read that particular book, that's what, when I read that book, actually that chucked up I was doing a different research project at the time, and I remember going back and looking at the Enfield haunting and the case, the Pontefract monk case, looking at both of those cases to see if there was any UFO reports coming in that area at the time, just to see if there was a correlation. I didn't find anything. I put that out there. But off the back of that book and reading about that particular situation, that led me down a different pathway for a while, thinking, okay, so I can't necessarily dismiss this in regards to the paranormal. Could it be an influence of something like that? And if that's the case, that opens up a whole different line of questioning.
It does.
So there does seem to be a correlation. And actually, if you've watched Hellier, anybody out there, there's very much a correlation there too. There's a lot of other stuff going on in conspiracy and stuff, but there's a lot of spiritual and paranormal stuff that goes on in that, as much as that seems to link to possible UFO world. Do you know what I mean? So there are correlations there. There does seem to be a link there. What that is, we don't know. It needs a lot more work done in that way. And I don't know who's doing that work. I'm sure somebody out there must be doing that kind of work.
Yeah, I think a few people are sort of like sort of showing a bit more interest. I'm certainly sort of leaning towards now, sort of like my latest sort of interest is into high strangeness. I think that's a better sort of term for like ufology stroke Mothman, this sort of this in between sort of from traditional paranormal to UFO sort of full blown a UFO. I mean, this is the sort of like the border world of it, which I think the word and high strangeness fits quite well, which I know is quite championed in the Fortean world.
Well, one of the other shows that Paul said was one of his favourites was the Men in Black, which ties into this as well. Paul?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, no, I again, the Men in Black phenomena is quite interesting to me. I mean, everyone knows I'm a big movie buff anyway. The whole idea of Men in Black, it's just an interesting subject. And apparently it has been reported that people have been, after having an experience with close encounters of the first, second, third, fourth and fifth kind or whatever, they've had these experiences with men or women dressed in black and told to keep quiet.
I mean, it certainly is sort of. I'm going back to the book you mentioned, Kerry, the the Mothman prophecies. I believe those are probably the most earliest reports of this sort of strange after the event occurrences to actually happen, isn't it? That they did seem to sort of strange cars would pull up and with people coming out and wanting to question the witnesses, and usually following a very sort of basic script.
You seem to have one thing. I think when we looked at accounts of Men in Black, it came across as it was either very strange in itself that the person who was the air quote man in black was a strange character in its own right, almost like it was somebody trying to be a human.
Yeah.
Or government official dressed as a man in black.
Yeah.
It came across as very true. The earliest one was actually in 1947, which was the same year as the Roswell. Not connected to Roswell, it was a different case. But that was actually the first account of somebody being approached by a man in black. And even with that photograph with the Solway, it's the one with the little girl with the...
Oh, what, the Solway spaceman.
Yeah, that photograph. Even that had, after they'd taken the photograph and put it out there, that they had a couple of men visit them dressed in black, said that their names were Agent this or Agent that, and got quite annoyed because all they could do was take him to where the photograph was taken and say, well, this is what happened. That was it. That's all I know. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Although now some people say they look at that photograph and it looks like the wife that's turned away, and that's the explanation for that photograph. But he said, there's this account that he was visited by these two agents who got quite cross because he couldn't give them any more information. So there are accounts of this. But what I find interesting is that duality of, in the Mothman prophecies, it was very normal people dressed in black questioning people, or somebody who wasn't quite right. Yeah,
I mean, the Men in Black phenomenon or scenario, I mean, I sort of get half of it. I mean, if you are a government agency or something and you do hear of someone reporting an event from somewhere, I mean, surely you would send someone along just to inquire about it. If it was causing a big sort of stir. I mean, you must do. That's basic sort of government. Yeah, basic sort of government work. You can imagine in sort of whatever department. I'm not saying it's deep secret. You can probably it's probably a local authority saying, well, we've got a lot of reports coming in from this area saying this and that. Just go and have a chat to a couple of people, and that's not so much they probably don't believe it themselves, but surely if you have part of your population, which, like the Mothman prophecies, there's a lot of people sort of claiming they were seeing something, and surely it's the local authorities' responsibility, or government or whatever, to actually go out and investigate.
I think the problem is... Sorry, Paul, carry on.
Looking at it from another point of view, it could also be time travellers. They might be popping back to various points in history where people have experienced these early contact with UFOs, and they want information. Or they're there to observe.
I can see where you're coming from in that, but again, that is sort of, to me, that's sort of more sort of like a far-fetched answer. I think that if this is going on, my frame of reference, I know you think big, Paul, the cosmos and time travellers.
Well, it just might explain why some of these Men in Black are not always human. And they have that alien-esque type of body frame and things like that.
Yeah, that's certainly a feature of them. I mean, but I think for the more sort of mundane and run-of-the-mill, when they say they are sort of people, I mean, I don't think sort of like a witness that is approached by a person, that looks normal, is going to sort of fabricate that. And I find it quite plausible that, as I said, a local department, a government agency and stuff, if something was reported, would send someone out just to have a chat.
Yeah, it could be a mixture of both.
I was going to say, couldn't it be a mixture of both?
Yeah,
It's another one of those high strangeness things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to pin it down because it does then lead you down into the world of conspiracy, which everyone seems to be embracing these days. I would just like to put that out, and it's based very much on a confirmation biased of your own personal opinion, and not researched much beyond internet, I would say.
Or Facebook, I'd say.
Well, yeah, Facebook these days. But when you're going back and trying to verify information, it's difficult. You have to take what somebody says to you on face value. And I have spoken to an abductee as a private project, I said this on the show, who had an experience she can't explain. And it ticked all the boxes, as it were. An experience she couldn't explain. She's got an object in her body that, they won't remove because it could leave her permanently, a problem afterwards because it's fine where it is, leave it kind of scenario. And she did get visited by a man in black after the event. And this girl is very sensible. She's very sane as you like. We're not talking crazy. And when she recounts her experiences, the same with anything. You have to you listen to the account. You don't lead, you just have to listen to the account and then go from there, just like you would if it was a crime. You listen to what the person's got to say. You then, like a police force would do, research from the back of that and try and find verifiable information. They do seem weird characters, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
There's plenty of information, or should we say YouTube videos and stuff of these alleged men in black. They are a little weird at times. Some of the footage you look at and you think, doesn't look right. For whatever, it could be CGI, it could be... And this is the problem, isn't it, nowadays?
Well,
I see both sides of the coin here. I see both sides of the coin because the accounts, if you look at them, they're so varying that it could be anything or nothing.
I'm quite blown away that you've got a sensible friend.
Thanks. I do have a few of them.
That is surprising.
Thanks, Rich.
No, I'm sure no. I've met some of your friends and they're all very nice.
Yeah, considering you're one of my friends, I've got quite a few weird ones, haven't I? But when you look at, again, go back to the Mothman Prophecy book, he starts that book by saying, one windy, stormy night, there's a guy who's dressed in black, goes to a house because he's broken down, knocks on the door, asks to use their phone, and there is born a man in black account. And it was him. And all he wanted to do was use the phone because he'd broken down on the highway. He starts the book with that encounter or that story. It's almost like he's saying, bear in mind, there could be a logical explanation. I'm going to just lay out the stories for you. It's up to you to make your mind up and look at the rabbit holes that I followed without it. That's one thing I do find about John Keel from that particular book. I have not read much of his work, and I want to get Steve Ward on because to enlighten us more about John Keel, because he's a massive fan and researcher on that particular one. I want to get him on. And, to look at that a little bit more closely, because he did have some incredibly weird stuff happen to him. His electronics were like back in the day when he was doing it. His phones were tapped. He was under surveillance. Why? If there's nothing to it, why would they bother? And that's the question, isn't it?
Oh, of course it is, as soon as you recounted the start of the book, I remember and I remember that from when I read the Mothman's Prophecy, which, thinking about it, I might try and dig out again, wherever it is.
And I believe he put that in there deliberately to basically say sometimes stories are born out of something quite mundane. Yeah.
Which is, quite a good way to actually start a story,
I actually think it highlighted the weirdness of the rest of the book, quite frankly, and personally. But I don't know. The Man in Black phenomena is something that's ongoing now. I do think there's a lot of fake out there. I know a YouTuber that's very into researching ufology work, and he was doing a live feed, and things started to go wrong, and then he was like, they're outside and they're following me and all of this in an unmarked car. And there's the famous Dan Aykroyd story, and it is fascinating though, you can't deny it. You do go, ooh, weird.
Weird. We like weird.
Weird with the capital weir.
On that note, we've actually come to the end of the first half.
Okay, that was quick.
So we're going to take a quick break and join us right after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK radio network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network. Now, before the break, we were looking at the men,
women, children.
Men in Black is what we were looking at. But I want to take you into one of my next favourite shows. I saw The Greatest Showman a couple of years ago now, actually, this was. And when I saw that, I wanted to do a show on P.T. Barnum, but we never got around to it until last year.
Yep,
that's right. One of our very early shows.
It was one of our very early ones. And as I say, that was one of the first shows that I wanted to do because it had been in my head for a long time to do a show on P.T. Barnum. Because I think that explained showmanship, the place of showmanship in regard to, mediumship, in regard to how you can psychologically manipulate people without them even realising it. I think it showed the Victorian fascination with weird and wonderful. Really.
All the exotic things, wasn't it? Was it the Fijian mermaid was the famous one?
Yeah, half monkey, half fish. That was fake, totally fake. But P.T. Barnum sold it as this is true, and people lapped it up. And then when it came out as fake, he resold it and made another fortune. People re-seeing it to re-look at it to see if they could work it out.
Yeah,
he was the ultimate salesman, wasn't he?
Well, certainly. I mean, his museum. What was his place called? The American Museum or something? And it was massive. It was like a department store. And what really got me was looking at the research from that and stuff. He had everything in it. I thought Barnum at first was, if you go to his original museum, it just would have been a bunch of curios. But no, he had everything. Performers, and he had workshops. They had glass blowing going on. You know, you could go there and experience a whole, your favourite word, plethora of experiences.
Yeah.
I've just had a weird experience, boys, in my house.
Oh, yes. What's happened this time?
The light in my bedroom's just gone on, and the dog was up there, and he's just come down. He said, I ain't going up there. I ain't staying up there. The light has just literally just turned itself on.
Really?
No, I'm deadly serious.
Oh. Do you want to go and check it out?
I'm going to.
Okay.
You two carry on talking about P.T. Barnum. I'll be right back.
Yes, okay, dear.
The first time I experienced Barnum, we're probably going back about 6-7 years now, before The Greatest Showman come up, actually. We was doing a show on mediumships and the Barnum statement.
Oh, right, yeah.
How easy it was to actually fool people into believing that you're a medium by giving this random statement out, which basically covered everything, every eventuality. It applied to everybody.
Yes, the Barnum statement is actually quite famous. I think we might go into that in a little while when Kerry comes back downstairs wherever she's disappeared to. I hope she's all right.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. There's nothing else untoward apart from the light turned on.
All right. Well, it's
the
your
first-
house.
Well, it's not the first time. We did a show years ago. This was when we was on a different network, me and Paul, and we were doing a show on I can't even say the word because weird stuff happens.
Was that when the television went on?
No, that was we were doing a show on. See, this is the thing. We do get weird stuff happen sometimes. We were doing a show with again Brian Holloway, different station, and we were doing a live session with one of the apps on air, and we were live, not pre-recorded.
Yeah.
And as I'm doing it, my TV gets turned on, and the volume is top, and I don't have it on top. I have it on about 20, and it was 100, and it came on, and it was blaring, and I was like, "Oh my God, the TV's just turned on." And it's totally unrelated. And we're talking about P.T. Barnum. Light's gone on. And then the dog slinks down the stairs. The dog did not turn the light on, everybody. That's not possible.
Oh, yeah, the poor old Marley. She's, and he might be a clever dog, but he's not that clever, I don't think.
No, we did this show on demons. And literally, as we were talking, there was this massive thump from upstairs. And then after that, every time we said that word, the Skype would crash.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it? So I was forever like, well, I'm never talking about that word again. And then, and then funny enough, we did another show on that particular topic. And the whole time we were talking, we had guests on. And again, it was live. And we never get feedback through, like other voices coming through on the Skype. We're on it a lot. And we never have interference. And on this show, there was a definite voice in the background you could hear. As we were talking, it was talking like behind us. And it was going on for quite a lot of the show. It was the weirdest thing. So we did get the occasional weird thing happen when we're in the studio.
That might account for my technical issue during the break with my mic. Who knows?
I mean, totally unexpected or... Anyway, so that was a side note. Let's go back to what we were talking about, P.T. Barnum. It is... I think the most fascinating thing was the psychological look at that, was how you can manipulate people. And obviously the Barnum statement comes off the back of that particular, all about how you can manipulate somebody believing into something that's not there, generalised statements.
Yes, I mean, Paul did touch on the Barnum statement when you was upstairs. And... yeah, it's certainly very interesting, and it's quite it's a test sort of anyone can actually do. I mean, you can look up the Barnum statement online, just Google it and read it, and you would say, yeah.
I actually had to go on the show.
Yeah.
Of doing like a Barnum kind of statement. I don't know if I did a particularly good job, but a Barnum statement kind of reading. While we were live when we did the show. So when we were live on air, God, I've got live on air in the brain now. Do you know what I mean? But I just found that whole thing fascinating, and it all tied into the mythology that he had the Fox sisters as part of his thing, which he didn't. They performed at the Barnum Hotel, which was owned by his cousin down the road, but they weren't actually anything to do with P.T. Barnum.
Oh, and it's quite interesting to note that P.T. Barnum probably would have heard that his cousin had the Fox sisters round, and you would have thought that if he felt that there was something genuine with them or there was some sort of capital to be made from them, he would have snapped them up. But he didn't. Interesting. It was one of the great what-ifs, isn't it?
He was a particularly interesting character. And so I got the idea, and this shows where inspiration can come from and how it all links together in regards to the paranormal, really. So I'm watching a musical theatre film, which I then told Paul to go and watch, and he did, and he loved it. And I was like, how true to form is that? And then when I actually started looking at P.T. Barnum, he's still a worldwide name. Still know him.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the greatest showman on earth. I mean, everyone knows him. He looks just like Hugh Jackman.
He's amazing.
He does. He's uncanny days.
I had to say Hugh Jackman did an amazing job of that.
Oh, and is he another one of your favourites?
He was all right.
Is he a Johnny Depp?
He's not up there with Johnny, no.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't turf him out.
He was wrong.
Oh, Richard, you're making me blush. Oh, dear. And how he went into politics, and when we looked at his life, it's just one of those characters in history that you absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, and I liked the bit in the show because he went on tour, didn't he? He sort of actually came over here to the UK with one of his most famous acts was Tom Thumb, was it, or Colonel Thumb, or whatever he had the pseudonym of.
Yeah.
And that is a whole interesting story in itself. He sort of started off, I think he just hired a theatre and come over. He wasn't particularly well known, but sort of word spread through Victorian society all the way to the top. And by the end of his tour, he was at Buckingham Palace in front of Queen Victoria.
And we found out later on, one of our more recent shows, we've looked into Victoria a little more when we was looking actually at the Crown. When you think the last couple of shows we've done was like we looked at the Crown, which led us down into looking into Queen Victoria, and she was actually more into spiritualism and things like that than you would give her credit for, really.
Well, the royals back then, they were quite progressive. I mean, the Victorian era, I mean, you can see and everything, she did encapsulate that whole era. And that's why, it's named after her.
Shows the influence.
Shows the influence, yeah.
It does show the influence, which brings us into our little foray into Victorian spiritualism, because we had to look into this, because when we started looking into, okay, we looked at P.T. Barnum, and that sort of was like a earlier show, but then when we started looking at the locations of the Crown, which led us down to Queen Victoria, it led us down into the Fox sisters, it led us down into Victoria herself's fascination with the paranormal and the spiritual side of things. And then it led us down into the next show that Richard pulled to the table, which was the Penny Dreadfuls.
Oh, yes, the good old Penny Dreadfuls. When I found out I was doing this show, I was straight off to do... I believe I'd done the research for that, didn't I? I mean, it wasn't that long ago, actually. Yeah, and it was I must admit, it was a relatively easy show to research. I was quite surprised the amount of information out there, but it's just a great story. It's got everything, sort of. I was a huge comic fan sort of when I was younger, but you go back to the dawn of the Victorian age, was it the 1840s, and this is sort of like the birth of sort of classic sort of hack journalism stroke storytelling, and these sort of there was growing literacy, and the print paper and stuff like that was throwaway, and they could mass produce these little pamphlets. I don't believe they're more than like 14 pages in length of series of what became known. Well, and they originally started off as the Penny Bloods, because they usually covered sort of, quite macabre topics, and then they were sort of rechristened the Penny Dreadfuls, and they would recount, at the time, sort of like the earlier stories, and they would recount famous, well-known stories, but like Dick Turpin and certain pirate stories were quite common, and but they were very embellished historical accounts, and even today we still recite these accounts, which were first originated in the Penny Dreadfuls as historical fact. I mean, the classic being the ride of Dick Turpin to York on Black Bess. Mm-hmm. And I just found that whole era sort of fascinating. And what with my fascination with the Victorian sort of time, because I like it because you wouldn't get an idea from reading the Penny Dreadfuls, but there's a slight undercurrent that sort of men were men and women were women. When women were swooning women, and men had a sort of quite a defined role to play, to catch the swooning woman as she collapsed and stuff. I quite like all that.
It reminds me of Katie the Pirate. We did when we were looking at Victorian spiritualism itself.
Yeah.
The swooning women. I did say I was going to do a lot more swooning this year?
Well, this year, I mean, we've still got to wait until we come out of lockdown, but I'm sure we'll be able to find a gothic castle to take you to, Kerry, and if there's sort of something lurking in the shadows, you can have a swoon.
Have a
when
little
they jump out
swoon.
at you.
Yeah, why not? Ha, why not, eh? Paul?
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I did. I mean, some of the Penny Dreadful stories, they're brilliant. I mean, even like wasn't Sweeney Todd one of them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, sort of from the
Or
Penny
the
Dreadfuls.
inspiration of some of them. Yeah, I just love those sort of stories.
About the only two surviving accounts which modern day people would recognise is Sweeney Todd and Spring Hill Jack, which the second half of the Penny Dreadfuls episode actually took us down, didn't it?
It did. And Varney.
Yeah.
Can't forget Varney the vampire, the forgotten vampire.
Barney.
Vampire Slayer.
I got that book for Christmas, and I tell you something, it is pure Victoriana when you read it. Oh, it is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
You were quite taken with Barney, weren't you?
I was quite taken with Varney the Forgotten Vampire, bless him, mainly because, again, a lot of our preconceptions and ideas about what a vampire should be actually come from the Penny Bloods or the Penny Dreadfuls, as we're talking about. So, yeah, I found that whole fascinating. And then when I got the book, I didn't even realise it was in a book, which surprised me, totally surprised me. And I was like, oh my God. And it's got like the original illustrations in it and everything. It's just brilliant. So guys, go check it out. 'Cause there's a lot more information on the Penny Dreadfuls out there than you think. And actually, when you read some of them, you'll realise that, like Richard said, a lot of our preconceptions regarding the paranormal or mythology or how things should happen come from these Penny Dreadfuls from the Victorian period.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite amazing, really.
And now we overlay that. That's sort of like, that's kind of like our basis of where you can see the evolution of our paranormal investigation through from the Victorian period and parlour games like seances and stuff like that. And even when we looked at some of the older, I say the older characters, like Arthur Conan Doyle or Harry Price, we've mentioned a few times on various shows. We haven't actually done a whole show on him, but we need to, because I think that's an interesting topic. When all the Ghost Club and the SPR were all set up in around this time, this time period, early 19th century, coming off the Victorian period, looking more in depth at psi-ability and stuff like that. And you can see the overlay. You can see the belief system overlay on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, really. I mean, you sort of look at any historical document now, I mean, there's sort of like a touch of the 17th century, sort of like the broad ballad pamphlets. It was quite journalistic practice at the time, and this lasted into Victorian times, was to take an historic documented event and overlay your story on it. I mean, it was very common practice. And you can see why this sort of mishmash has actually come through. And today we are taking, which you can't blame people, but, perhaps a bit more in-depth research would actually show that a lot of stuff we take for granted or do in the paranormal today to try and gain a response, particularly sort of like your table tipping, your seances and stuff like that, is sort of an invention of these earlier pamphlets and stuff.
I think you mentioned Dick Turpin, and I think you've got to just look at that story now. We actually have a very romanticised vision of Dick Turpin, but actually, if you look at the history or the real information, he's not a nice character.
Oh, he was a very violent man. Yeah,
he wasn't very attractive either. Everybody, I will say that.
Oh dear,
Paul.
So Johnny
Depp was
Depp,
a lovely fella.
So Johnny Depp wouldn't play him in a film then.
Well, he probably would, but I think you'll get a more realistic version because he's not adept. He's not. He will make it up. But like you go to the London Dungeons, they've actually got like a waxwork of what they believe he actually did look like.
Oh right.
And he's pockmarked. He's not an attractive man at all.
Right.
Because they were like, who do you think this is? And everyone was like, well, I don't know. It's actually Dick Turpin. And we were like, no. Because in our heads, we've got like Richard Chamberlain. We've got, big characters that have played this, this character. And this romanticised vision that came from the Penny Dreadfuls originally of his escapades. And, but when you actually look at the history of Dick Turpin, always got to say the second name with this one.
We don't want to say Kerry loves Dick.
No, we don't want to say that, Richard. We so don't want to say that. Oh my God.
Well, that's just me doing my psychic thing. And it just came through to me.
Did it? Lovely.
Yeah.
Anyway. Oh my God, I've thrown me off. It's usually Paul who does that through a show, but you managed it tonight, Richard.
Just having fun.
But when you look at that, that romanticised vision of things, that's where we get it from. It's like these Penny Dreadfuls, which was pure Victorian. But also, we looked at Jack the Ripper, because the police back then would do their own kind of pamphlet at the same time to highlight crimes that they were trying to solve as well at the time. And obviously, read it, murder, read all about it. It comes from that period of time as well. And this is why Jack the Ripper has got such a focal point in history. I mean, the fact that the case hasn't been solved, but when you look at the whole history surrounding the time period and the police force and the political landscape and all of that regarding that, this is one of the reasons why that has got its firm place in history.
Well, it's coming off the back of that show. I was thinking about the part we done about Jack the Ripper, and I got in contact with our producer, Andy Mercer, which Happy New Year, by the way. And I sort of said to him, and if it wasn't for the press sort of like coverage and the way the press portrayed this, would those Whitechapel murders be as well known as they are today? Because, Jack the Ripper murders, wow, he goes, no, probably not. They just would have been another set of unsolved murders in London.
Because as we discussed with the Spring Hill Jack, when we looked at the accounts of Spring Hill Jack, which was actually where we started looking at this particular thing in regard to the Penny Dreadfuls that Paul had brought to the table with Spring Hill Jack, we started looking at the accounts that were put there, and we were like, this is just so unlikely.
Yeah. I mean, I know sort of like the modern paranormal community, Spring Hill Jack does pop up a bit. You do see him floating around in sort of like odd posts and stuff, and people asking for opinions. But again, if I hate my own personal opinion, he is a total fictitious character. There's no sort of paranormal element to it whatsoever. Sorry to spoil it for everyone.
Oh dear. Richard's full of spoilers tonight. Now, Paul's next one. He is. I know. Paul's next one was somebody he brought to the table who has been on the peripheral around the edges quite a lot. But we'd never actually spoken to her or looked into her work. But it was quite fascinating. And it tied two of Paul's favourite things together. Food and paranormal investigating.
What are you trying to say? I'm offended now.
It's true. You like a pre-investigation
glad
meal.
everyone enjoyed tonight's show.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Trying to lead into Spook Eats with Amanda Woomer here, trying to do that thing.
Oh, yes. Good Amanda.
I first saw her on Twitter, actually, tweeting about a new book. And I thought, actually, it sounds quite interesting because she doesn't go for the normal haunted houses type of locations. She goes for, like, distilleries and restaurants and things like that. And I thought, actually, that's quite a good, interesting way. She's coming into the paranormal from a different angle. And I thought, this is someone we need to talk to. So we contacted her and brought her onto the show. And, absolutely fascinating. And then she launched a new book, which I bought, just to bulk up my paranormal book shelf. Incidentally, we've got a book out. available on Amazon.
But I think with Amanda, and as you say,
Paranormal Concept Extra.
but I think with Amanda, and as you say, Paul, she has sort of like created her own little sort of niche in the paranormal and been quite successful at it. Well, we would like to think and since she's been on our show, she's everywhere. But
of course she is.
She's been propelled into the middle of the paranormal circle.
But no, she was quite well known and in her own right and beforehand. But she sort of took that and she's combined it with something very close to my heart, which is road tripping. So it's sort of like, I think with Amanda, the whole sort of the planning, the actual going, the actual sort of staying at the place. I mean, that's the whole experience. It's not just sort of going to a dry sort of location and just sitting there for a few hours and then coming away.
Yeah, exactly.
With Amanda.
And she writes blogs on it, and obviously she writes her books and stuff. If anyone's interested, you can find her on Twitter under Spook Eats. I think the way she goes about it is absolutely fascinating, and that's why I thought it'd be really interesting to get her onto the show and help promote a book and see where it can go from there. And she has come, I think, further into the UK.
Well, yes,
since she's been on our show. I mean, I'm not saying that it's because of our show, but she just seems to be more into the UK paranormal scene as well at the moment now.
Yeah, I think she's not averse to actually travelling over here, because we were quite on edge during that show because she was pretty much expecting heavily, wasn't she, by then? But she was. But she's had the baby since then, and we'd just like to wish her all the best for that and send our congratulations over to her.
Oh, yeah, very much so. It's like baby spooky.
She's probably still getting sleepless nights.
Well, yeah.
Baby spooky. It was brilliant. And she's been to the UK. She had been to the UK, and when we was talking, it was like, oh, I've got to go here and I've got to go there. And she's like, it was like she'd come over on vacation with her family. And she was like, I didn't get to do some of the things I wanted to do because, it was their vacation too. But, it's brilliant because she went to, I remember her talking about going to a place in America. Can't remember the name of the cafe. I don't think it's a cafe. It's like a diner. And there was a chair. It was called a heart attack chair because 2 people apparently had heart attacks and died in that chair, so nobody sees.
Oh, lovely.
And she said that actually they ordered like the main meal, that their signature meal, and it was just like basically a heart attack on a plate. That if you didn't get it, then the chances are.
It's like one of those giant burgers that you have to eat in 10 minutes to win $1,000 or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah,
it was like one of those meals. Yeah.
I used to watch Man vs. Food. Do you remember that show?
Oh,
and the Americans do tend to like their sort of eating challenge. Or most sort of restaurants or sort of diners, particularly, will have a sort of their signature eating challenge, which usually is sort of something, heart attack on a plate usually.
It was a really interesting show, and off the back of that show we went into the second part of the show, looking at the effect of fast food and how that can impair or change your body and give you maybe what you might think would be spiritual activity or happenings in your body, like headaches and being touched and being drained of energy and all those sort of things that people report when they're doing paranormal investigations, when it actually could be, possibly, maybe, something to do with the food you eat.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, that's possibly a no-brainer. I mean, you look at the very basics and you cut that down to the very basic. What happens when you had your little kids come back from the children's birthday party they went to, with the red jelly and the orange squash and all that, and they'd be off the scale.
I always used to thought that after those parties you're supposed to get locked into the cellar, aren't you?
I don't know. Yeah.
That's how you deal with children, Paul.
Yeah.
You can tell
they don't bounce off the walls that much when they come out after that. But no, you're right. I mean, what you put into your body is very important, and it's and everything has an effect.
And no sort of disrespect to the investigators out there, and even I do it, and we've all done it. And when you go on investigations, it is, and if you do take stuff with you, I mean, it is sort of pretty much high sugar content sort of stuff. I mean, like Kelvedon Hatch, which was the last one we were all present at. I mean, I was sitting with Kerry and her partner brought along a nice sort of chest full of, Viennese whirls and almond slices.
Oh, it was cake fest.
It was
It
cake.
was like a proper
absolutely.
sugar fest.
9 times out of 10, most paranormal investigators, when they go out to a location, they always hit McDonald's or KFC first.
Yeah.
En route. And, there isn't... I personally prefer a nice sit-down meal. Mm-hmm. And I go to, Harvest or something, but it's still... you still have, a high meal before you go in. But the McDonald's one does have a bad effect on your body.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's something I'll bring to the table again. I know I've mentioned this a few times. Sort of, I used to work in like a rehab drop-in centre for sort of ex-addicts, alcoholics, and drug takers, and we high energy drinks like Red Bull and stuff are banned. You're not allowed to take them in because, believe it or not, and they are just as bad. And you can get addicted to those.
Yeah.
And they're classed as hallucinogenic type sort of drinks, especially if you're sort of predisposed to that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, because unfortunately, a lot of people recovering tend to switch as a natural sort of choice to high energy drinks. And it's still not good for you.
I actually know someone who goes through cold turkey. After he drinks these drinks.
Yeah.
He has, I can't remember how it was, more between 4 and 6 a day. And then when he stopped, he went right into cold turkey.
Yeah, I can imagine it.
Goodness me, that's an awful lot just on the basis. Well, anyway, let's move on. Go into the horrors of food and the effect it can have on your body. And actually, guys, if you are going into a diet because of the new year, I don't know about you, I've had massive lockdown spreads last year. I'm going on a diet this year. I'm not happy, so I will be dieting. So diet tips will be coming throughout the new year.
Yes, that's right. I've actually lost a bit of weight since I started mine. I started one day after Christmas Day, you see.
Yeah,
so,
good for you, Mitch.
yes, I'm not having to lie down on the bed to put my jeans on.
Kerry's
Today was the
tips have
first
already
day.
started working.
Although, if you are going to go on a diet, go with a reputable company or seek medical advice before dieting.
And there's the voice of reason. Anyway.
That's my professional bit done.
Right, I want to move on because I want to do my last show because there's another couple I want to highlight before we go. Away with the Fairies. I liked the shows we did where it's almost like a fact from fiction. So we took a case and we had a look at it and we dissected it a bit. And in the Away with the Fairies show, obviously we looked at the Cottingley Fairies with Arthur Conan Doyle. And we all now look at those photos and go, why was he taking it?
Really?
Yeah. But we had a look
What
at...
energy drink was he drinking?
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? Because now we look at them and they're fake. But again, you have to take it time relevancy. Photography was in its early stages. It was, people kind of just didn't believe you could fake things. Now, we know everything can get faked. Gosh, filters are a phenomena that hit the Instagrams and the Snapchats and God knows what. Not only that, but you've got, how many times did we see people holding up the Snapchat filters and it showed a face or the filter went on something behind the person and going, oh, it's a ghost. No, it's just focusing on something different. Looking for facial recognition. That's how it works. It's just how it works. It's not ghostal at all. But in the same show, we looked at the Roanoke phenomena, mystery, Roanoke.
And we debunked it.
We did look at that.
It was certainly an interesting one, wasn't it? It's something...
We called it because 2 weeks after that show, I watched another documentary on it, and it came up with the same conclusion we did.
Ah, See, we're amazing. We're ahead of the time,
And-
everybody.
Exactly. And they even DNA tested the local residents of the whatever it was tribe down the road that it was suggested they'd gone and joined, and they have got European DNA in with them, so it's very likely that that is what happened.
I think, particularly something like the Roanoke, would you call it an incident or event? It sort of goes down in sort of like folklore, doesn't it? Or sort of, and they can tend to be picked up sort of later on by the paranormal community and stuff. But it does go to show that the most mundane sort of reason, which was speculated at the time, is probably the correct one. I mean, you sort of look at it now, and there's probably all sorts of theories that aliens come down and grab them or whatever. But the most mundane theories, they probably got into difficulty, went to the local tribe and just settled with them. It would just make perfect sense.
There were clues to that were left. But it was a mystery that people turned up. All of a sudden, there was no dead bodies. Those people had just disappeared off the face of the earth. It was, it was a mystery. But it is a mystery that has been proved. The theory has been proved now through modern day scientific exploration of archaeology, nothing to do with the paranormal, archaeology, scientific discovery regarding DNA testing. It's just phenomenal when you think of it. All these millions, hundreds of years later, millions of years later, millions of years later, hundreds of years later, they've proved it. The theory that's what it was, and it's great.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about,
good.
is it? But that's
and we
good.
should celebrate that as well.
Exactly.
So I know some people will go, oh dear, it's not aliens, or whatever, it's not Bigfoot coming to grab them. I mean, but we should celebrate that as well.
I agree. We also looked at the Voynich manuscript.
Oh, the Voynich manuscript. That was a funny one, wasn't it?
That is a funny one. It's one of our producers' little bugbears, this particular one. And although it has got a length of time, it's been looked at. It has been decoded, which isn't being put out there. Everyone's still...
No. They've got a good idea of what it actually is, haven't they?
Yeah, because the right person with the right set of skills looked at it, and with his knowledge, he went, this looks like Latin shorthand. But he also had knowledge of medieval medicines.
Yeah.
And because he had that skill set, he was able to look at it. Now, this had been looked at by loads of different people, but it needs the right person with the right skill set to look at it with those eyes and go, well, actually, this makes sense to me because of this, this, and this, and this. And he's decoded that. But that hasn't hit. This is still, again, put out there, a massive conspiracy regarding this whole manuscript, even down to it was a relatively modern-day fake by the guy who sold it. Well, they've carbon dated, so they think it is as old as he said it was. But the guy saw a chance to make a quick buck there.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, they sold it off, and and it offered them. I don't see much of it around these days. I think people tend to be sort of like leaving it alone. There was all sorts of, particularly sort of like the drawings or of sort of plants that are not recognised, but are they stylised drawings? I mean, and looking at it, and I sort of, because there's facsimiles online, and you can actually buy it. You can buy a facsimile of the Voynich manuscript, and actually sort of like looking at it, it does look familiar to its time frame where it comes from. It does look like some sort of apocryphal document, book. It does look very much like that.
Well, as I say, it's actually been looked at by somebody with the right eyes at the right time, and it's been sorted. In that show, we also looked at there was a big thing this year about H.H. Holmes is Jack the Ripper. It's been floated around for a few years, this one. And so we had a look at a bit more. And we looked at, in that particular way, we looked at the modus operandus, I think it's called, isn't it? The way serial killer, how they profile serial killers. And, he doesn't fit the remit. And although there are way you can understand why people would jump to that assumption.
Well, yeah, of course.
Because there is that paper trail break in around the same time, and there is somebody supposed to have been called H.H. Holmes on a boat that went from London to America, and then all of a sudden the murders in the UK apparently stopped. But his modus operandi is completely different from Jack the Ripper, and it's highly unlikely that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. And again, a lot of conflicting information out there. You've got some people that are like, yes, I believe it so. And others that are like, well, no, actually, because this bit don't add up and that bit don't add up. And you have to take the whole thing and look at it, right?
Well, of course you do.
It was a Kaminsky bloke. He did it.
Well, I'm going to give our producer a heart attack, and I'm going to say it was H.H. Holmes.
No, don't. After that show, because on that show I said to you guys, who do you think it was? Whenever we talk about Jack the Ripper, you've got to have a theory on who it is. I always say Walter Sickert, and he always messages me afterwards and goes, I'm going to edit that out. It was not him. It was Aaron Kosminski. And I'm like, I do it to wind him up now. So I'm sticking with my Walter Sickert. But I like doing those kind of shows where you can take a thing like that and research it and look at it from all angles. And I do like that. But I have to say that is, every time we talk about Jack the Ripper, we all go not overly comfortable because we don't know everything, because there's a lot of information out there about it. So again, another one I'd like to do next year or this year. I keep saying next year, but you know what I mean. This year is actually to get a proper ripperologist on and break it down a bit more.
Yeah, that'd be good. Do we know any?
Yeah,
of course we do. We know 2 or 3. Right. On that
yes,
note,
we do. Yes.
Mm-hmm. On that note, I do want to reference a couple of extra shows rather than our favourites. Those were all our sort of individual little favourite ones. But there's a couple that we've done this year, and in fact, every show we do, we couldn't do without our amazing producer, Mr. Andy Mercer. And he's even joined us on a few shows this year. He helped us out with the history of witchcraft, which is so hard to pin down, right, guys?
Well, yes, it was it was a bit of and I wouldn't say a baffling show. We managed it, but I think Andy sort of, people think there's a history, a lineage, there's a set trail of events and stuff. It is not that straightforward. No,
it was very difficult.
And not only is the subject really hard to pin down, but so is Andy.
But I think I know which show you're going to go on to, which was a fascinating show, Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, now Andy had written a book on Dante's Inferno and had a look at that, and that perception of hell that we all have, and it actually comes down to Dante, really.
Well, yes. I mean, I did enjoy. I went away and sort of like did a bit of a read up. I mean, again, you can find it online if you Google Dante's Inferno, and there's a famous pictures like a inverted sort of pyramid, and it's got all these levels. And if you read like a synopsis, it is, it's fascinating. As you slowly descend to the bowels of hell, and hell is not what a lot of people perceive it is.
It's not a burning, fiery inferno, is it, Richard?
No, it's not. It's a frozen lake.
With Satan in the middle.
Yeah.
Yes, or half frozen. So he's got his top half of the torso out, and the rest of him's frozen. And he's got 2 people, isn't he? One in each hand. I think they're biblical people, aren't they, or something? But yeah, odd.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But you can see where the saying comes from: when hell freezes over, can't you?
Yeah, very much so.
Already frozen.
But he's written a book on this, guys. So if you are interested in knowing a bit more about that without reading Dante's Inferno itself, then go and get Andy Mercer's book, because he's got several books out. He's an amazing source of information to us, because in the back of that show, both of those shows, we went into runes, which Paul had recently bought a set, hadn't you? And you was going down that little road.
What little road?
Runes.
Oh, yeah. Only because I bought the runes off of you and I wanted to learn more about them. So Andy suggested a couple of books, which I subsequently bought and haven't really had time to read yet.
Oh, you're so busy, aren't you, Paul?
Yeah,
Have you
I am at
cast
the
your
moment.
runes? Have you taken them out of the bag and slung them across
Yeah,
the room?
but I will be doing that in the new year, just as soon as this St John work's over and done with. So once that's done, that's my focus for next year.
Yeah. As I say, he's a producer. He produces our show every single week. So thank you so much, Andy Mercer, because we couldn't do this show without you. And thank you for bringing clarification on a lot of different topics that, even if you're not on the show, we generally have asked.
Yes.
Or gone back and asked,
that.
on that one, because he's got a huge amount of information in that little brain of his. I'll say big brain of his. It's hard sometimes.
Big brain, I think.
Yeah, we'll go with big brain on his. So, yeah, go listen to those shows because they're fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Now, another one I want to bring to the table, I want to say a massive, because this is another person I get quite a lot of information from, is Sarah Chimicero from Living Life in Full Spectrum. We had her on to do a show on EVP. She'd just written a book on it. And again, what a fascinating discussion that turned out to be.
I did enjoy that show. I mean, it was, sort of when I thought, EVP, I think everyone has a preconception of what it is, but, that Sarah brought to the table the book, the history of EVP, where it developed from and stuff. And I was quite surprised with the lineage it actually had, going back to, was it the 1920s even?
Yeah, it's just, and when we was talking, because I always have trouble with EVP. I said it on the show. It's like, oh my God, I can never really hear them. It has to be like someone's talking to me in the same room for me to hear them, because but you have to train your ear. Then we talked about how our ears can be deceiving. The big Liane and Laurel thing that was around, I think that was not last year, the year before, I think that was. And she discusses that side of things in the book and everything. But she's a prolific blogger. Again, a bit like Amanda Woman. They're prolific bloggers. They bring out regular blogs on lots of different topics, well researched. So that, information is out there, isn't it? To go and find and research and read. And I'm hearing a lot of criticism at the moment in the field, the paranormal field, this is, of people not being educated or not doing the research. But the information is out there. Listen to shows, podcasts, listen to...
You have to go a little bit deeper than Wikipedia. That's where a lot of people tend to stop.
Yeah, you can do a lot of digging, or beyond the actual investigation.
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of something, we sort of try and champion, but, it might take off. I mean, there's sort of two sides to every sort of paranormal sort of realm, isn't there? You've got your sort of ones that just go out for the thrill and enjoy the night. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's
nothing wrong with that at all. The only sort of thing is, just be honest about it. But sort of don't try and dress it up to be something it isn't. But there are people out there that are doing the work, and sort of people like Sarah, is a very good example of it. I subscribe to her website and get her blogs sent through. I think daily sometimes. I think, God, does that girl right?
She like I say, she's a prolific writer, well researched. It's totally her passion. Doesn't dismiss. She brings all sorts of hopefully we do the same. Play devil's advocate on quite a lot of topics that we've covered over the year. We'll go round in circles and play devil's advocate against, what may be our personal perspective on something. And that's something that's really important to do is to weigh off both sides. You can't dismiss everything, but you can't accept everything either. You have to sort of look at the evidence, as it were, look at the research that's been done, look at the pioneers of the paranormal or field that you're in, paranormal being the umbrella term for a lot of different things, and then draw your own conclusions. Another person that was absolutely fascinating to talk to was Robinson.
Well, Malcolm.
Malcolm Robinson, thank you. And again, he'd looked at a very, very early ufology case.
Yes, that was the one in Scotland, wasn't it, in the forest? And it was a very sort of bizarre case, wasn't it? I believe, Paul, you sort of found that case quite interesting, didn't you?
Yeah, we was doing the show on Christy Moray, and he was saying that it's very hard to investigate UFO cases because it's hardly heard of that you ever get physical evidence of a UFO experience. So I thought, I'm sure there is one, and I've heard it. So I had a quick look and dug around for a case that was actually in Scotland, and the guy he had the experience. He was basically in the woods, and he experienced this UFO, and it assaulted him basically. And he went home to his daughter, and they took him to the hospital, and they reported to the police. They had it all forensically examined. So they have got hard physical evidence of this UFO experience, and it's the only case I've ever heard of. But it was investigated by Malcolm Robinson. And that's
and that was the sort of springboard to actually sort of, right, we'll get him on. And he was promoting a book as well.
As a follow-up.
Yeah, was it the Salchi Poltergeist we also delved into with
Yes. Yeah, I bought that book as well.
Fascinating cases that these people have had first-hand experience about actually, researching, and it's like, that's the gem, isn't it? Is it that the holy grail is to get your hands on a fresh, brand spanking, fresh off the bat account where you can go out in the area and do the footwork, rather than looking at a case that happened like 30 or 40 or 100 years ago.
Yeah. So it does sort of go to show that this sort of stuff is actually quite rare. But when they do come up, if you've got the expertise and you've sort of got the right connections and you can get in there, I mean, it's the holy grail. Like sort of most paranormal investigators, I suppose, would say their holy grail is a poltergeist case, isn't it?
Yeah, there's too many. I think there's too many cases around there that claim they're poltergeist, but they're not actually.
Well, when we were talking to John Fraser about poltergeist, he was talking about just one of those things, which is something Marianne Barrington... oh, God. I always get this lady's name wrong. Barrington. Mary Barrington? Mary Jane Barrington? Oh, anyway, I can't remember her name now. But she coined it as just one of those things. And it was where it's like even down to like something goes missing in the house and then turns up in a really weird, unexpected place, like a week or so later, and you go, hang on a minute, I know I looked there and it wasn't there. It's just you put it down to just one of those things, or the fairies, or, something along those lines. But that could be very minor poltergeist activity.
Well, yeah, and I think, and anyone listening to this will probably identify with that, at least at some point. I mean, I saw most of us blokes with car keys is usually a classic.
I've had a case actually where a pair of sunglasses, very distinctive sunglasses, have gone missing, never turned up. And we have had the house and garden stripped and changed.
Have you looked on your head?
Yeah. I think I would have noticed. It's a few years ago now.
They're still there.
They're still there on my head. Every time I wash my hair, I go, oh, take them off, put them back on again. That's just called senility, age.
Oh, so you lost your Ray-Bans, did you?
Yeah. They're totally gone. Like, totally gone. We've had, as I say, the whole house has been decorated and changed, and the whole garden has been done since then, and where they went, God only knows.
Oh, I don't know.
No, strange. Again, one of those things where,
you'll probably go upstairs now and find them lying on your bed.
Oh,
because you probably switched the light on just to let you know. I left them on the bed.
Yeah, there's God, that would freak me right out. Cause that was years ago. That was if they turned up on my bed, knowing that I was asleep on it about 4 hours ago. Anyway. So that's our whistle-stop tour of some of the things that we encountered and looked at and researched and people we spoke to last year. And we're going into a brand spanking new year. I've already talked about a couple of shows that we'd like to do this year. What about you guys? I've said a couple of shows that I'd like to do. What about you guys? Where are we going to go this year?
I mean, there's a few bits and pieces. I've actually sort of had a message from someone, which I did share with you, which we can talk off air a bit later, which I believe would make an interesting show. The more I look at it, the more I'm warming to it, which involves channeling. Which is something we've never looked into. I mean, it's something, I usually sort of brush off and think, it's the way with the fairies sort of stuff. But this does seem different. And I'm hoping to, watch this space.
Interesting.
Maybe we can go into the spirituality of inner space.
Well, there you go.
You're not bringing the cosmic egg back to the table, are you?
Oh, that's a good idea. We could do that.
Oh, no. I found the advert for that show. We never did, because Paul was quite adamant to do a show on the cosmic egg. So I was sort of making up the ad for it. But then, I think Kerry sort of said, this is too complicated. I always remember that. I spent all that time labouring over that egg. I had to find a picture of a cosmic egg
I did. I
on
really
the
told
internet.
it. I was like, nah, we ain't doing that. In my horrible way that I am, my old hag kind of scenario that I come out with occasionally. Well, if
I was just watching a movie called Ant-Man the other day, and he shrinks himself into like the all the atoms and stuff, and it just looks like outer space when he just went so small, and it was all like the atoms and atomic stuff. Yeah, it was interesting.
You do like these big topics, don't you?
Yeah,
lovely.
Class as inner space, isn't it? And it's all got to be spiritual as well, because it is all connected by energy, although it's going to be our energy. So why not? We could have alien civilizations within us.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, God almighty. Yeah, interesting few shows coming up, guys. And if there is anything at all out there that you'd like us to tackle, then don't forget you can get in contact through our website, which is paranormalconcept.com. On there, you're going to find lots of blogs going up in the new year. And if you want to look at any of our past blogs, then you're going to have to go on amazon.co.uk or .com or whatever it is, Amazon, and get a copy of the book we have just released, which is The Paranormal Concept Extra. We've come to the end of the show, guys.
Wow. That was good. Good start to the year.
A little reminder of everything we've done this year. It's quite a lot, really, when you think about it.
A reflection show. There's nothing wrong with it.
Well, we've done a reflection, and believe it or not, throughout that show, we actually put some intentions out there as well.
Yeah. You can't beat a few intentions.
Got it. New Year's intentions. Got to love
So does that mean next week we're doing Inner Space?
No.
No, I don't know what I'm doing next week.
No.
But, we're not doing Inner Space, Paul.
No. On that note, say good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
Good night, guys.